I'm Eleanor Gibson, 70 years old, and my world collapsed when I divided my $1.2 million inheritance among my 3 children after Douglas died. I expected gratitude, maybe even care in my vulnerable years. Instead, my daughter Patricia, who I helped most throughout her life, offered me her garage. "We don't have any space for you in our lives, Mom," she said coldly. My own flesh and blood reduced me to leftovers after I gave them everything. If you've ever been betrayed by those you sacrificed everything for, please subscribe to this channel for more stories of resilience and redemption. Let me know where you're watching from and hit that like button if you believe family should never treat each other this way. I wasn't always the abandoned mother living on the edges of her children's conscience. Once I was Eleanor Reed, a bright-eyed college student who fell in love with Douglas Gibson during my sophomore year at Midwest State University. We married young, just 22, full of dreams and determination. Douglas studied engineering while I worked as a bookkeeper to support us. We were middle-class Americans who believed in hard work and family values. After graduation, Douglas secured a position at a manufacturing company, and I continued my bookkeeping job. We saved diligently, eating home-cooked meals and avoiding luxuries that our friends indulged in. By our late 20s, we had enough for a modest down payment on our first home in Springfield. It wasn't grand, just a 3-bedroom ranch-style house with a small yard. But it was ours. When Patricia arrived in 1976, our world changed. I reduced my working hours to care for her, but we still struggled financially. Douglas took on weekend consulting jobs to compensate for my reduced income. We drove the same car for 12 years, patching it up rather than replacing it. Vacations meant camping at state parks, not flying to resorts. But we were happy. Robert came along 3 years later, and Jennifer followed another 5 years after that. With 3 children, our modest home felt cramped, but we made it work. When Douglas was offered a partnership opportunity in a small manufacturing business, we took the biggest risk of our lives. We remortgaged our home to invest $50,000 in the venture. I remember signing those papers with trembling hands, knowing our entire financial security hung in the balance. The gamble paid off. By the mid-1990s, Gibson Manufacturing Components had become a respected regional supplier. We weren't wealthy by any means, but we were comfortable enough to focus on giving our children advantages we never had. Patricia, our firstborn, always showed academic promise. When the public school couldn't challenge her adequately, we scraped together $8,000 annually for Westfield Academy. I took on additional bookkeeping clients to help cover the tuition, working nights after the children were asleep. When Patricia was accepted to Brentwood University, we paid her full tuition, room, and board, approximately $120,000 over 4 years. Douglas worked extra hours while I managed the company books to save money on accounting fees. When Patricia married Thomas Reynolds in 2001, we contributed $35,000 to their wedding, depleting our personal savings. 5 years later, when they struggled to purchase their first home, we provided $50,000 for their down payment. When their twins arrived, I drove 40 miles 3 times weekly to provide childcare so Patricia could return to her marketing career. For 8 years, I spent more time in her home than my own, cooking meals, doing laundry, and nurturing my grandchildren while neglecting my own interests and friendships. Robert chose medicine, an expensive dream we fully supported. His medical school education cost us approximately $200,000, plus living expenses. When he graduated with additional student loans, we paid off $75,000 to give him a fresh start. Later, when he wanted to open his private practice, we loaned him $100,000 for startup costs, which he eventually repaid, though without interest. We were proud of his success as a cardiologist, believing our sacrifices were worthwhile investments in his future. Jennifer, our youngest, struggled to find her path. We funded her first degree in communications, $80,000, then supported her through a second degree in psychology, $65,000, when she decided to change careers. When her marriage to Michael Anderson disintegrated after just 3 years, we paid $15,000 for her therapy and helped her secure a new apartment with first and last month's rent plus security deposit, $4,500. We regularly supplemented her income during tough months, never asking for repayment. Throughout these years, Douglas and I continued living modestly. We finally renovated our kitchen after 30 years, but otherwise maintained our frugal lifestyle. Our retirement plan centered around the eventual sale of the business, which had grown significantly under Douglas's leadership. When Douglas was diagnosed with aggressive pancreatic cancer in 2021, everything changed. He declined rapidly, and within 6 months I became a widow. The business was sold as planned, resulting in a $1.2 million payout after taxes. I also received $300,000 from Douglas's life insurance policy. As I approached my 70th birthday, living alone in our family home filled with memories, I made what I now recognize as a catastrophic financial decision. Watching my children struggle with mortgages, education costs for their own children, and career pressures, I decided to divide most of the inheritance immediately, rather than waiting until after my death. "I want to see you enjoy this money," I told them during a family dinner at Patricia's home last year. "Your father worked his entire life to build something for all of you." Each child received $400,000 tax-free, leaving me with the remaining $300,000 from the insurance, plus our paid-off family home and modest retirement accounts totaling approximately $100,000. I believed this was sufficient for my remaining years, especially since I expected to be welcomed into my children's homes whenever I needed support or companionship. How tragically wrong I was. The money transferred, and almost immediately, the dynamic shifted. Weekly phone calls became monthly texts. Invitations to family gatherings grew scarce. My grandchildren, once regular visitors, now appeared only on obligatory holidays. I noticed but rationalized their behavior, telling myself they were simply busy with their lives. I had no idea they were already mentally writing me out of their futures. 6 months after distributing the inheritance, rising property taxes and maintenance costs for our aging family home became burdensome. The property tax had increased by 15% in 1 year alone, and the roof needed replacing, an unexpected $14,000 expense. My financial cushion was eroding faster than anticipated. After careful consideration, I decided to sell the home and move to a small apartment, investing the proceeds to supplement my income. The 2-bedroom apartment at Oakwood Gardens cost $1,850 monthly, manageable within my budget. For the first year, I lived comfortably, occasionally treating my grandchildren to lunches or small gifts. I established a pleasant routine, joining a senior center, taking water aerobics classes, and volunteering at the local library twice weekly. Then came the notice that shattered my security. Effective in 60 days, my rent would increase to $2,300 monthly, a 24% hike that my fixed income couldn't absorb. Reviewing my finances with growing anxiety, I calculated that at this rate, my savings would deplete entirely within 5 years. At 70, with the average American woman living to 81, I faced potential financial ruin. My first thought was to reach out to my children. Surely, after receiving such generous inheritances, they would help their mother avoid financial hardship. I planned my approach carefully, not wanting to seem demanding or entitled. I invited Robert and his wife Stephanie to lunch at a modest restaurant near their suburban home. After pleasant conversation about their children and his medical practice, I broached the subject. "The rental market has become quite challenging," I explained, keeping my tone light. "I'm considering my options for the future, and wondered if you might have thoughts about my situation." Robert shifted uncomfortably in his seat while Stephanie suddenly became engrossed in her salad. "What exactly are you asking, Mom?" Robert finally responded. "I'm exploring the possibility of a multi-generational living arrangement," I said. "Perhaps a small addition to your home, or converting the basement into an apartment. I'd contribute financially, of course." The silence stretched painfully before Robert cleared his throat. "Our house really doesn't have the space, Mom. The basement floods occasionally, and an addition would require permits we probably couldn't get because of setback requirements." Stephanie nodded vigorously. "Plus, we value our privacy as a nuclear family. Having anyone else living with us would change the dynamic. The children need their space for development, and Robert needs quiet after his stressful workdays." "I understand," I murmured, though my heart was sinking. just exploring options. The rest of the lunch passed in strained conversation. When they dropped me at my apartment, Robert gave me a quick, formal hug. "We'll figure something out if things get really dire, Mom. Don't worry." Jennifer responded to my inquiry with a text message rather than agreeing to meet in person. "Mom, I'm going through an important personal journey right now and need my apartment as a sanctuary. I love you but can't share my space at this point in my life. Have you considered senior living communities?" This from the daughter whose personal journey I had funded repeatedly throughout her adult life. The daughter whose divorce therapy sessions I had attended as her support person. The daughter whose rent I had supplemented just 3 years earlier. With growing desperation, I approached Patricia, my firstborn, the child for whom I had sacrificed the most over the years. Patricia and Thomas owned the largest home, a 4-bedroom colonial in an exclusive neighborhood. Their twins were now in college, leaving 2 bedrooms vacant. Surely they would welcome me. Patricia suggested meeting at her home on a Tuesday afternoon. I arrived with a homemade coffee cake, a peace offering and reminder of the care I had always provided. "I've been thinking," I began after we settled in her expansive kitchen, "that perhaps we could help each other. With the twins at college, you have extra space and I need affordable housing. I could help with cooking and housekeeping, maybe even watch the house when you and Thomas travel." Patricia exchanged glances with Thomas, who looked distinctly uncomfortable but remained silent. "Mom," Patricia said firmly, "we've finally gotten our freedom after years of child-rearing. The guest rooms are for the kids when they visit, and we've converted one into Thomas's home office. We don't have any space for you in our lives right now." The words struck like physical blows. No space in their lives. Not just their home but their lives. Seeing my expression, Patricia backpedaled slightly. "But we do have the garage. We could convert it into a small apartment for you. There's plumbing already for the utility sink." "The garage?" I repeated incredulously. "I'll show you," she said, already standing. "It's actually quite spacious." I followed her in a daze to the detached 2-car garage. Thomas had remained in the kitchen, apparently unable to witness what was happening. "See, we could put up drywall here," Patricia gestured vaguely. "Add some insulation. A small bathroom in this corner. You wouldn't need much kitchen, just a microwave and mini fridge since you could come into the house for proper meals sometimes." The concrete floor was stained with oil. Garden tools hung from walls that would supposedly become my living space. A lawnmower sat where my bed would presumably go. A single dusty window offered the only natural light. "Of course, you'd need to contribute to the renovation costs," Patricia continued pragmatically. "Maybe $20,000? And a small monthly rent to cover utilities. Say $500. I couldn't speak. This daughter lived in a 3,800 square foot home purchased with my help. She had received $400,000 from me just months ago, and she was offering me a converted garage and expecting me to pay for the privilege. "It would be your own space," she added, misinterpreting my silence as consideration. "You could decorate it however you want. Within reason, of course." "And when would this conversion happen?" I managed to ask. "Oh, not immediately. Thomas is busy with work, and we're planning a European vacation this summer. Maybe in the fall? You could stay in a senior living place temporarily. My own daughter was suggesting I find temporary housing for months while waiting for them to convert their garage into a substandard apartment, at my expense." "I see," I said quietly. "Thank you for the suggestion. I'll think about it." As I drove home, tears blurred my vision. The garage offer wasn't just inadequate, it was deeply insulting. It communicated clearly what my children thought of me now that the money was gone. I had become an inconvenience, a problem to be managed with minimal disruption to their comfortable lives. The mother who had sacrificed everything had been reduced to a leftover human, suitable only for storage in a garage alongside garden tools and seasonal decorations. I returned to my apartment as evening shadows lengthened across the city. Mechanically, I hung up my coat, placed my purse on the entry table, and stood in the silence. The ticking of the grandfather clock Douglas had given me for our 30th anniversary suddenly seemed deafening. Each tick marked another second of my diminishing future. I moved to the living room window, staring unseeing at the street below. How had it come to this? Where had I gone wrong as a mother? Had I given too much? Not enough? Had I raised entitled, selfish humans incapable of empathy? The tears came then, not in dramatic sobs but in silent, relentless streams down my weathered cheeks. I didn't bother wiping them away. There was no one to see, no one to care. I was truly alone. As darkness enveloped the room, I remained motionless, replaying scenes from my children's lives like a tragic film. Patricia's 5th birthday, when Douglas and I had worked overtime for weeks to afford the dollhouse she coveted. Robert's high school graduation, when we presented him with Douglas's father's gold watch, a family heirloom meant to inspire his medical career. Jennifer's heartbreak after her divorce, when I spent 30 consecutive nights on her sofa, making sure she didn't sink into the depression that had plagued her since adolescence. Where were those children now? Had they ever existed? Or had they always been the calculating adults who now viewed me as a burden? Around midnight, I finally moved to the kitchen, mechanically swallowing my blood pressure medication without water. I hadn't eaten since breakfast, but hunger was absent. Opening the refrigerator revealed containers of homemade soup and casseroles I had prepared earlier in the week, efficient meals for one person. The sight suddenly repulsed me. Was this what remained of my life? Cooking single portions, eating alone, existing on the periphery of my children's lives? I closed the refrigerator and moved to the bedroom, where insomnia awaited. Lying rigid beneath the covers, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing through increasingly desperate scenarios. Perhaps Patricia's garage wasn't so terrible. With proper insulation and heating, it might be habitable. I could make it cozy with inexpensive furnishings. I would be near family, even if they viewed me as an imposition. Maybe over time they would welcome me more fully into their lives. But even as I considered this option, my stomach churned with humiliation. I imagined explaining to acquaintances that I lived in my daughter's garage. I pictured the pitying looks, the awkward silences. I envisioned the daily reminder of my diminished status every time I walked from my garage apartment to the main house, a supplicant seeking permission to exist in my daughter's orbit. Around 3 a.m. my thoughts turned darker. My life insurance policy would pay $50,000 upon my death. Split 3 ways, it wouldn't significantly impact my children's finances, but it would end my humiliation and financial anxiety. The thought floated through my consciousness, not as an actual plan but as evidence of my desperation. Dawn brought physical symptoms of my emotional distress. My hands trembled as I attempted to make coffee. My blood pressure reading was alarmingly high, 168/95. I had lost 4 pounds in the week since receiving the rent increase notice. Dark circles shadowed my eyes, and my normally neat appearance had deteriorated. At 9 a.m. I called Mildred Carson, my friend of 40 years. We had met when our daughters attended the same kindergarten class, bonding over volunteer work and shared values. Unlike me, Mildred had retained financial independence after her husband's death, carefully protecting her assets rather than distributing them to her son. "Eleanor? You sound terrible," she said immediately. "What's happening?" The simple expression of concern broke something within me. Between sobs, I explained my financial situation and my children's responses. "A garage? Patricia offered you her garage?" Mildred's outrage was palpable. "After everything you've done for that girl? After the $400,000 you just gave her?" "I don't know what to do," I admitted. "My savings won't last at the new rent rate. I'm too old to return to full-time work. I feel trapped." "Listen to me carefully," Mildred said, her voice firm. "What your children are doing is elder abandonment, morally if not legally. You are not obligated to accept crumbs from the table you spent a lifetime setting for them." "But what choice do I have?" "More than you realize," she replied. "First, you need professional advice, not family manipulation. Second, you need to remember who you are, Eleanor Gibson. You're the woman who helped Douglas build a successful business from nothing. You're the woman who managed household finances through recessions and setbacks. You're not powerless just because you're older." Something in her words penetrated my fog of despair. I had been viewing myself through my children's eyes, as a burden, a problem, an inconvenience. But that wasn't my true identity. What should I do first? I asked, a fragile determination forming. Call Frank Nelson at Secured Futures. He specializes in senior financial planning. Then call Harriet Wilson, the elder law attorney who helped me with my estate plan. And Eleanor? Don't tell your children anything until you have a solid plan. The moment they sense independence, they'll try to undermine it. After hanging up, I sat at my small dining table and began a list, something Douglas and I had always done when facing challenges. The simple act of organizing my thoughts on paper brought a familiar clarity. By noon, I had appointments scheduled with both professionals Mildred recommended. For the first time since receiving the rent increase notice, I ate a proper meal. I showered, applied makeup, and dressed in a navy suit I had worn to business functions in better days. Looking in the mirror, I straightened my shoulders and addressed my reflection. You are Eleanor Gibson. You built one life with Douglas. You can build another without him, without ungrateful children if necessary. The words sounded hollow at first, an affirmation without conviction. But as I prepared to leave for my appointment with Frank Nelson, I repeated them, this time with growing belief. The darkest night was ending, and though dawn seemed distant, I was determined to move toward its promise. Frank Nelson's office occupied a modest suite in a professional building downtown. At 65, Frank himself contradicted the image of slick financial advisors portrayed in media. No flashy watch or designer suit, just practical professionalism and clear expertise. Mrs. Gibson, let's establish where you stand financially, he began after introductions. Then we can explore options. I provided detailed information. My remaining assets, $25,000 in savings, $105,000 in retirement accounts, monthly income, $1,860 from Social Security and a small pension, and expenses, currently $2,735 including the upcoming rent increase. Frank's analysis was straightforward. You're facing a monthly deficit of approximately $875. At that rate, your savings would be depleted in about 28 months. That's the problem we need to solve. Can I recover any of the money I gave my children? I asked hesitantly. That depends on how the transfers were structured. Were they formal gifts with documentation? Yes, we completed gift tax returns. Douglas was adamant about doing everything properly. Frank nodded. That makes recovery difficult unless you can prove coercion or diminish capacity at the time of gifting, which doesn't sound applicable. Let's focus instead on creating sustainability with your remaining assets. He outlined several options. Downsizing to a smaller apartment in a less expensive area, exploring income-based senior housing, though wait lists typically extended years, or considering shared housing with another senior. There's another possibility worth exploring, Frank added. Some smaller communities are offering incentives to attract seniors. They recognize that retirees bring stable income and community involvement without burdening school systems. What kind of incentives? I asked skeptically. Property tax abatements, utility subsidies, sometimes even reduced price housing. Let me make some inquiries and get back to you. My next appointment was with Harriet Wilson, an elder law attorney with a reputation for fierce advocacy. Unlike Frank's measured approach, Harriet's style was direct, almost confrontational. Your children's behavior is unconscionable but unfortunately common, she stated after hearing my situation. I've seen this pattern repeatedly. Parents distribute assets during their lifetime, then find themselves vulnerable and unsupported. Is there any legal recourse? I asked. Regarding the gifts, it's difficult without evidence of exploitation. However, we should discuss protection for your remaining assets. Let's update your will, advance directives, and power of attorney immediately to prevent future manipulation. Harriet also suggested a formal letter to my children documenting their refusal to provide support, creating a paper trail should adult protective services ever become involved. The suggestion shocked me. I don't want to threaten my children with authorities. This isn't about threats, Harriet clarified. It's about protecting you. But I understand your reluctance. At minimum, let's ensure your remaining assets are properly protected. Over the next week, I researched affordable living options obsessively. Senior communities in the area were either well beyond my budget or offered such minimal amenities that they resembled institutions rather than homes. Shared housing possibilities seemed fraught with compatibility issues. Moving to a distant suburb would reduce housing costs, but increase isolation and medical transportation challenges. Then Frank called with unexpected news. "I've found something that might interest you," he said. "A community called Riverside Meadows about 90 miles northwest. They've initiated a senior vitality program, offering significant incentives for retirees." "What kind of community is it?" I asked cautiously. "Former manufacturing town experiencing population decline. They're revitalizing their downtown and see seniors as valuable community members. They have 3 small cottages available at subsidized rates through their program." "What's the catch?" My years in business had taught me skepticism. Legitimate question. "The catch is location, obviously. You'd be leaving familiar surroundings. Also, program participants must contribute volunteer hours to community organizations, though that requirement is flexible for health concerns." Frank arranged a virtual tour of Riverside Meadows and one available cottage. The town featured a restored main street with essential businesses, a medical center affiliated with a larger hospital 30 miles away, and a surprising number of cultural amenities resulting from their revitalization efforts. The cottage itself was modest but charming, approximately 800 square feet with 1 bedroom, an updated kitchen and bathroom, and a small garden. The financial terms were compelling. $725 monthly rent with utilities included, locked in for 3 years with modest increases thereafter. The security deposit and first month's rent totaled $1,450, well within my means. Property taxes in the area are 40% lower than your current location, Frank noted. And their volunteer coordination program helps seniors reduce transportation costs through carpooling and scheduled shuttle services to larger towns. I researched Riverside Meadows extensively, reading local news, viewing additional property listings, and even joining a community Facebook group to observe interactions. The more I learned, the more viable the option seemed. My next step required emotional fortitude. I contacted Gerard Williams, an antique dealer who had expressed interest in several pieces I'd inherited from my grandmother. The Chippendale writing desk, Victorian mantel clock, and sterling silver tea service were family heirlooms I'd planned to pass to my children. Now they represented financial security. "I can offer $12,800 for the collection," Gerard said after careful examination. "They're lovely pieces that will find appreciative buyers." I also visited Morton Jewelers to sell several items. My tennis bracelet, a 25th anniversary gift, a sapphire ring inherited from my mother, and 2 gold necklaces. Together they brought $8,600. Less than their insurance valuations but fair in the resale market. These transactions increased my available funds to $46,400, creating a safety net beyond the immediate housing solution. With renewed purpose, I contacted the Riverside Meadows Senior Vitality Program Coordinator, Martha Jenkins. "We would be delighted to welcome you to our community, Mrs. Gibson," Martha said warmly. "Your bookkeeping background would be particularly valuable to several of our nonprofit organizations." I submitted my application, including financial documentation and references. Within days, Martha called with approval. "Cottage 3, on Maple Lane will be available June 1st. Will that timing work for your relocation?" June 1st, exactly when my current rent would increase. The synchronicity felt meaningful, a confirmation of my decision. Without informing my children, I signed the lease agreement, paid the deposits, and began organizing my downsizing process. I created detailed lists of items to keep, sell, donate, or discard. I researched moving companies and scheduled estimates. I contacted utility companies to arrange service transfers. Each small step strengthened my resolve. Each decision reaffirmed my capacity for independence. The woman who had felt powerless in her daughter's garage now methodically planned a self-determined future. By mid-May, my preparations were nearly complete. I had sold or donated approximately 60% of my possessions, arranged for a small moving truck, and established a new banking relationship with Riverside Credit Union. I had updated my driver's license, transferred medical records to Riverside Health Center, and connected with community resources at my future home. The final step would be the most difficult, informing my children. After considerable thought, I decided a family dinner would provide the appropriate setting. Not at Patricia's home, where I would feel disadvantaged, but at my apartment, where I could maintain control of the conversation. I sent a group text. I'd like to host dinner next Saturday to discuss my future plans. Please confirm your attendance. Love, Mom. Their responses were predictably self-focused. Robert, I have a conference that weekend but can stop by briefly. Jennifer, is everything okay? You're not sick, are you? Patricia, we can come, but Thomas has an early meeting Sunday, so we can't stay late. I replied simply, not sick. Important family discussion. Dinner at 6 p.m. As I prepared for this confrontation, I felt neither vindictive nor victorious. My children's rejection had wounded me deeply, but my response wasn't about punishment. It was about survival and self-respect. Whatever happened next, I would face it from a position of strength, not supplication. I spent Saturday morning preparing comfort foods from my children's childhoods. Robert's favorite beef stew, Jennifer's preferred rosemary roasted potatoes, and Patricia's beloved apple crumble. The familiar routines of chopping, stirring, and seasoning calmed my nerves as I rehearsed what I would say. At 5:55 p.m., Robert arrived first, dressed in conference casual attire and checking his watch conspicuously. I can only stay 90 minutes, Mom. I have preparation for tomorrow's presentation. Jennifer appeared next, carrying an unnecessary bottle of wine and kissing my cheek distractedly. The traffic was awful. Is this going to be a long thing? Patricia and Thomas arrived precisely at 6 o'clock, Patricia immediately examining the apartment with critical eyes. You really should have professional cleaners in, Mom. This place collects dust terribly. We settled around my dining table, the atmosphere tense despite my culinary efforts. Small talk about grandchildren and work obligations filled the first 20 minutes. I noticed my children exchanging glances, obviously speculating about the purpose of the gathering. As I served the apple crumble, Patricia finally addressed the unspoken question. So, Mom, what's this important discussion about? Have you decided about the garage apartment? I placed the dessert spoon deliberately on the table and straightened my posture. I've made decisions about my future, yes, but not about the garage. Are you having financial problems? Robert asked, his tone suggesting inconvenience rather than concern. Because we discussed this and I thought we agreed you'd look into senior communities. I have explored all my options thoroughly, I replied evenly. And I've secured appropriate housing. This caught their attention. Jennifer leaned forward. What kind of housing? Where? I've leased a cottage in Riverside Meadows through their Senior Vitality program. It's affordable, well-maintained, and comes with community support services. Blank stares greeted this announcement. Finally, Thomas spoke up. Riverside Meadows? Isn't that the old factory town up north? Why would you move so far away? It's 90 miles, Thomas. Hardly another country. Patricia's expression shifted from confusion to indignation. You're moving without discussing it with us first? We're your family. I did try to discuss my housing needs with each of you. I reminded them gently. Robert explained his home had insufficient space. Jennifer needed her apartment as a sanctuary. And you, Patricia, offered me your garage at my expense. Robert shifted uncomfortably. If this is about money, Mom, we could have discussed options. Maybe I could help with your rent here temporarily. This isn't about temporary solutions, I explained. It's about sustainable independence. Riverside Meadows offers me affordable housing, a supportive community, and opportunities to contribute meaningfully despite my age. Jennifer's eyes narrowed suspiciously. This sounds sudden. Are you sure this place is legitimate? Have you visited in person? I've done extensive research, including virtual tours and background checks. The program is sponsored by state economic development funds and private foundations. It's completely legitimate. Patricia, who had remained uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly burst out. This is ridiculous. You can't just move away from your family at your age. What about medical emergencies? What about the grandchildren? Riverside has excellent medical facilities. As for the grandchildren, they can visit, just as they would here. In fact, the cottage has a guest room specifically for family visits. Robert checked his watch again. When exactly is this happening? I moved June 1st. The contracts are signed, deposits paid. The atmosphere shifted palpably. My children, who had arrived expecting either a health announcement or a request for financial assistance, now faced an independent decision they hadn't anticipated and couldn't control. "Mom," Robert said, adopting his doctor voice, "moving at your age creates significant health risks. Studies show relocation stress syndrome affects seniors disproportionately. As your physician's son, I strongly advise against this." "Thank you for your medical opinion," I replied calmly. "I've discussed the move with my actual physician, who supports my decision with appropriate precautions." Jennifer tried emotional manipulation next. "I can't believe you'd move away just when I'm finally getting stable again. I was counting on your support through my career transition." "You'll still have my emotional support, Jennifer. Phone calls, video chats, occasional visits. But you made it clear your apartment is your sanctuary, not a shared space." Patricia, always the most direct, abandoned pretense entirely. "This is about the garage, isn't it? You're punishing us because you didn't like my offer." "This isn't punishment, Patricia. It's problem solving. I needed affordable housing with dignity. You offered a garage with conditions. I found a better solution." "Well, if you'd been clearer about your financial situation, we might have offered more help," she countered defensively. "You always insisted you were fine after giving us the inheritance. Would it have made a difference?" I asked quietly. "If I had said I was struggling, would you have welcomed me into your home? Your actual home, not your garage." The uncomfortable silence answered more honestly than words could have. Thomas cleared his throat. "Eleanor, perhaps we were hasty. What if we discuss converting our basement instead? It has a separate entrance and natural light." Patricia glared at him. "We use the basement for storage. Where would everything go?" "That's exactly my point," I said softly. "In your homes and lives, I've become an afterthought, something to be accommodated only if convenient. In Riverside, I'll be a valued community member, not stored away like holiday decorations." Robert stood abruptly. "I need to leave for my conference preparation. Mom, we'll discuss this more when you're thinking more rationally." "My decision is made, Robert. The lease is signed." "Leases can be broken," he replied dismissively. "Don't make permanent decisions during emotional times." After Robert's departure, Jennifer attempted a different approach. "Mom, if this is about feeling needed, I could definitely use your help with my job search. Maybe we could find a 2-bedroom apartment to share temporarily." "Thank you, Jennifer, but I've committed to Riverside Meadows. I'm actually looking forward to the fresh start." Patricia's patience finally evaporated. "This is absurd. After everything we've done for you, you're running away because we couldn't instantly rearrange our lives to suit your needs." The injustice of her statement ignited something within me. "Everything you've done for me? Let's be clear about who has done what for whom." I turned to Patricia directly. "I paid for your private education, your university degree, your elaborate wedding. I provided your house down payment. I cared for your children 3 days weekly for 8 years so you could advance your career. Most recently, I gave you $400,000 that your father and I earned through decades of sacrifice." Patricia flushed. "That was our inheritance." "It was a gift," I corrected firmly. "One that apparently came with an expiration date on your gratitude and compassion." I addressed Jennifer next. "I supported multiple career changes, funded therapy during your divorce, and repeatedly supplemented your income. Yet when I needed emotional support and practical assistance, your personal journey took precedence. Finally, though absent, Robert received his accounting. I financed your medical education, paid off student loans, provided startup capital for your practice. I celebrated your success without expecting repayment, only basic human consideration when I became vulnerable." Thomas stared at his plate while Patricia and Jennifer sat in stunned silence. "I don't mention these things to demand repayment," I continued more gently. "Parents support their children without expectation of return. But when that support is dismissed as obligation rather than loving sacrifice, When previous generosity is forgotten in favor of present convenience, something fundamental has broken. So you're abandoning us, Patricia said, her voice uncharacteristically small.
No, Patricia.
I'm choosing myself after a lifetime of choosing all of you first. There's a significant difference. The remainder of the evening passed in awkward conversation. As my children prepared to leave, each made predictable attempts to reassert control. Think about this carefully before making a final decision, Jennifer advised condescendingly. Call me when you're ready to discuss realistic options, Robert texted after I relayed our conversation. Patricia's parting words were most revealing. When this Riverside experiment fails, don't expect us to rearrange our lives to rescue you. After they left, I sat alone in my apartment, emotionally drained but surprisingly peaceful. The confrontation had confirmed what I already knew. My children viewed my independence as a challenge to their authority, rather than a healthy solution to a difficult situation. Their reactions reinforced my decision. Riverside Meadows wasn't just affordable housing. It was an opportunity to reclaim my identity beyond motherhood and rediscover my value beyond financial provider. For the first time since Douglas's death, I felt genuine optimism about my future. Moving day arrived with unexpected emotions. Despite my confidence in the decision, leaving the apartment where Douglas and I had spent our final months together felt momentous. Each room held memories: the kitchen where we'd prepared simple meals during his illness, the living room where we'd watched old films during his better days, the bedroom where I'd held his hand as he drifted away. None of my children offered assistance with the move. Robert cited a medical conference, Jennifer claimed a job interview, and Patricia stated bluntly that she didn't support this decision. Their absence hurt but simplified the process emotionally. Mildred arrived at 7 a.m. with coffee and determination, supervising the moving company with military precision. They'll come around eventually, she reassured me as the last boxes were loaded. Or they won't, and you'll build a life that doesn't depend on their approval. The 90-mile journey to Riverside Meadows became a symbolic transition. With each passing mile, the landscape changed from urban density to rolling countryside. We stopped at a roadside diner for lunch, where I studied my new address on the GPS. 45 Maple Lane, Cottage 3. My future home. Martha Jenkins, the program coordinator, met us at the cottage with keys and a welcome basket. The community center is hosting a potluck dinner tonight, she mentioned casually. No pressure to attend, but it would be a lovely way to meet neighbors. The cottage exceeded my expectations. Though small, its open floor plan created an airy atmosphere. The kitchen featured newer appliances than my apartment had offered. The bedroom easily accommodated my queen-sized bed and dresser. The bathroom included grab bars and a walk-in shower with a bench, sensible features for aging residents. Most delightful was the sun porch overlooking a modest garden with established perennials. Mildred helped arrange essential furniture before departing with promises to visit monthly. By early evening I had unpacked enough to create functional living spaces, though boxes remained stacked in corners. Exhausted but restless, I decided to attend the community potluck, bringing a store-bought pie with apologetic explanations about my moving day. The community center occupied a restored Victorian building on Main Street. Approximately 40 residents gathered in the main hall, their ages ranging from 60s to 90s. I entered hesitantly, immediately conscious of being an outsider. "You must be Eleanor Gibson." A robust woman with silver hair approached immediately. "I'm Helen Whitaker, your neighbor from Cottage 5. We've been eagerly awaiting your arrival." Helen introduced me to her husband Walter and several other residents, including Caroline Porter, a retired librarian, Victor Ramirez, a former high school principal, and Gladys Simmons, who described herself as Riverside's unofficial historian. Each greeted me with genuine warmth rather than the polite distance I'd expected. "Martha mentioned you have bookkeeping experience," Victor commented during dinner. "Our community theater desperately needs financial organization. Would you consider volunteering a few hours monthly? No pressure, of course. The garden club could use your skills too," added Gladys. "Our treasurer moved to Florida, and none of us can balance the checkbook properly." These weren't charity offers to the newcomer but genuine requests based on needed skills. For the first time in years, I was being valued for my abilities rather than my maternal role or financial resources. I returned to the cottage that night with contact information from 5 residents and tentative plans for coffee with Helen the following morning. The empty cottage felt different now, less lonely and more like a blank canvas awaiting personalization. The adjustment period included predictable challenges. I occasionally got lost on Riverside's winding streets. The smaller living space required creative organization. The unfamiliar bedroom disrupted my sleep initially, but each day brought incremental progress toward comfort and belonging. Helen proved invaluable during this transition. She introduced me to practical resources: the family-owned grocery store that delivered to seniors, the medical clinic's transportation service, the community center's activity calendar. Through Helen, I met her book club members, all women in their 60s and 70s with diverse backgrounds and vibrant personalities. By my second week, I had established a preliminary routine: morning coffee on the sun porch, volunteer bookkeeping at the community theater on Tuesdays, garden club meetings on Thursdays, afternoon walks around Riverside Lake. I discovered Mabel's Bakery, where owner Mabel Henderson reserved cinnamon rolls for regulars, a status she immediately granted me. My children's responses during this period revealed their continuing discomfort with my independence. Jennifer texted occasionally, asking perfunctory questions about the cottage while emphasizing challenges in her own life. Robert called weekly. His conversations weighted with medical warnings about isolation and aging-related risks. Patricia maintained stubborn silence, broken only by forwarded photos of the grandchildren with no personal messages attached. The most revealing communication came 3 weeks after my move, when Robert texted, "Have you learned your lesson yet? Your apartment complex has openings now at last month's rate." The message clarified their perception. My move wasn't a thoughtful solution to a legitimate problem, but a childish attempt to manipulate their sympathy. They were waiting for my inevitable surrender and return. I responded with more patience than the message deserved. "I'm not learning lessons, Robert. I'm building a life that works for me. The cottage is lovely and I'm making friends. You and the family are always welcome to visit." My subtle boundary setting received predictable pushback. Robert insisted he was too busy for social visits, but would arrange care if needed. Jennifer claimed the distance was prohibitive given gas prices, though she frequently drove farther for weekend retreats. Patricia remained silent. Their resistance reinforced my decision rather than undermining it. Each week in Riverside brought unexpected developments that enriched my new life. Victor introduced me to Maggie Donovan, owner of Riverside Bookshop, who needed part-time bookkeeping assistance. The position offered modest compensation, $150 weekly for 10 hours work, but significant psychological benefits through productive engagement and community connection. The garden club appointed me treasurer despite my newcomer status, valuing my professional skills over seniority. The assignment connected me with Riverside's agricultural history and current sustainability initiatives. Most unexpectedly, I discovered artistic interests previously unexplored. The community center offered watercolor classes taught by retired art teacher Bernard Klein. My initial attempts produced laughable results, but the process itself provided meditative focus and creative satisfaction. Bernard's encouragement kept me returning despite my limited talent. As summer progressed, my cottage transformed from generic housing to personal sanctuary. I arranged furniture to maximize natural light. I displayed cherished photographs and mementos on custom shelves installed by Walter Whitaker, who rejected payment in favor of my apple crumble. I planted marigolds and petunias in the garden, modest flowers that brighten the entrance. My physical health improved noticeably. Regular walks around Riverside Lake strengthened my stamina. Community center yoga classes increased my flexibility. Mabel's cinnamon rolls notwithstanding, my diet improved through Riverside's farmers market and Helen's nutritional influence. My blood pressure stabilized at 132/78, significantly better than during my apartment crisis. For months after my arrival, I hosted my first dinner party. Helen and Walter Whitaker, Gladys Simmons, Victor Ramirez and his wife Evelyn gathered in my small living room, which I had rearranged to accommodate card tables borrowed from the community center. We enjoyed a simple meal of roasted chicken, seasonal vegetables, and Mabel's apple tarts for dessert. As conversation flowed easily among these relative strangers who had become friends, I realized I had achieved something precious. A chosen family based on mutual respect and shared experiences rather than obligation and history. "You've done remarkably well here, Eleanor," Victor observed as the evening concluded. "Some newcomers take years to integrate so successfully." "I had excellent guides," I replied, genuinely grateful for their acceptance. That night, after my guests departed, I sat on the sun porch watching fireflies illuminate the garden. My phone contained no messages from my children, no acknowledgement of the milestone this dinner party represented. Yet the absence caused less pain than it would have months earlier. I was creating a life centered on my needs and contributions, rather than familial approval. As I prepared for bed, I noticed Douglas's photograph on my nightstand and spoke to it softly. "I think you would approve of this new chapter, my love. It's not what we planned, but it has purpose and dignity. I'm going to be all right." For the first time since his death, I fully believed those words. 6 months after moving to Riverside Meadows, I celebrated my 71st birthday with an afternoon tea at the community center. Helen organized the gathering, inviting 20 residents who had become regular presences in my life. The bookshop where I worked part-time closed early so Maggie could attend. Bernard brought a watercolor he had painted of my cottage, professionally framed as a gift. "Speech," Victor called after the cake was served, prompting good-natured agreement from the assembled guests. Standing somewhat self-consciously, I surveyed the faces before me. 6 months ago, I arrived in Riverside as a stranger in a difficult transition. Today, I celebrate my birthday surrounded by friends who have become essential to my happiness. Thank you for welcoming me into this community and allowing me to contribute in meaningful ways. The simple truth of these words struck me powerfully. I had indeed found purpose and connection in this unexpected place. My volunteer work with the community theater had expanded to include directing their financial restructuring. My garden club responsibilities now encompass grant writing for public beautification projects. My watercolors, while still amateurish, had improved enough for inclusion in the community art exhibition. More significantly, I had developed authentic friendships based on shared interests rather than convenience or obligation. Helen and Walter had become surrogate siblings, including me in family gatherings and checking on me during minor illnesses. Gladys shared her extensive knowledge of local history during our twice-weekly walks. Victor and Evelyn invited me to their lakeside cottage for weekend barbecues. Bernard offered artistic encouragement and philosophical conversations about aging creatively. My birthday celebration represented visible evidence of successful reinvention. The woman who had once felt worthless enough to consider a garage apartment now hosted community events, contributed valuable skills, and navigated independent living with confidence. 2 weeks after this milestone, however, life delivered an unexpected challenge. While tending my garden on an unseasonably warm October afternoon, I experienced sudden dizziness and chest discomfort. Recognizing potential cardiac symptoms, I called Helen, who immediately drove me to Riverside Medical Center. Dr. Maria Santos diagnosed atrial fibrillation, an irregular heartbeat requiring medication and monitoring. Though not immediately life-threatening, the condition necessitated a 3-day hospitalization for observation and treatment adjustment. From my hospital bed, I texted my children with straightforward information about my condition, emphasizing that I was receiving excellent care and had strong support from Riverside friends. Their responses were predictably varied. Robert requested my cardiologist's contact information, presumably to evaluate treatment protocols professionally. Jennifer expressed general concern without specific offers of assistance. Patricia didn't respond directly, but instructed her daughter Amanda to call me. Amanda's call revealed family dynamics I hadn't previously recognized. "Mom didn't tell us you were in the hospital until Grandma Mildred called," my granddaughter explained. "I wanted to check on you myself." Our conversation was refreshingly direct. At 22, Amanda possessed clarity her parents lacked, asking thoughtful questions about my health and living situation. When I mentioned the friends supporting me, she responded with genuine happiness rather than the skepticism her mother might have expressed. "I'd like to visit you in Riverside sometime," she said near the conversation's end. If that's okay with you. I'd love that, Amanda. The guest room is ready whenever you are. During my hospitalization, the Riverside community demonstrated remarkable support. Helen brought personal items from my cottage and coordinated a visitor schedule, ensuring I was never alone during waking hours. Walter installed a shower grab bar in my bathroom before my return home. Victor arranged transportation to follow-up appointments. Maggie and the bookshop staff created a meal delivery rotation for my first week of recovery. My discharge instructions included activity restrictions and dietary modifications that would require adjustment, but not dependency. Dr. Santos connected me with Riverside's home health service for initial monitoring, and the community center's wellness program offered specialized exercise classes for cardiac patients. Throughout this health challenge, my children remained physically absent despite my hospitalization being public knowledge. Their emotional distance contrasted sharply with the practical support provided by friends I'd known less than a year. This reality was painful but instructive, confirming that my decision to build a life in Riverside had been not just financially necessary, but emotionally prudent. 2 weeks after my discharge, I received an unexpected text from Patricia. Amanda insists on visiting you. Would next weekend work? She doesn't drive distances alone, so I would bring her. The message represented the first direct communication from Patricia in months. I responded affirmatively, both excited and apprehensive about this development. Patricia and Amanda arrived Saturday morning, Amanda bounding from the car with genuine enthusiasm, while Patricia approached more hesitantly. My granddaughter embraced me warmly, exclaiming over the cottage's charm and the garden's beauty. Patricia offered a stiff hello and an impersonal gift bag containing generic bath products. This is lovely, Grandma, Amanda said, exploring the cottage. It feels like you. Nothing like the garage apartment, is it? I remarked to Patricia with intentional lightness. She had the grace to flush slightly. The cottage is nice. Smaller than I expected. Perfect for one person, I replied. Would you like some coffee? I was planning to show you both around Riverside today. The tour revealed Riverside's transformation through my eyes. We visited the bookshop where I worked, meeting Maggie, who greeted me warmly. We walked the lakeside path where I exercised daily. We browsed the farmer's market where vendors recognized me by name. We had lunch at Mabel's bakery, where Mabel herself insisted on treating Amanda to a cinnamon roll on the house. Throughout these activities, Amanda engaged enthusiastically while Patricia observed with increasing discomfort. The evidence of my successful integration into this community contradicted her narrative about my Riverside experiment. That evening, after Amanda went to bed in the guest room, Patricia and I sat on the sun porch in uncomfortable silence. Finally, she spoke. Amanda thinks I treated you terribly, she said bluntly. She found out about the garage offer and hasn't let me forget it. Is that why you're here? Because Amanda insisted. Patricia sighed. Partly, but also because seeing you in the hospital made things real. You could have died, and our last significant interaction would have been that awful dinner where you announced your move. I wasn't dying, I clarified. But yes, health incidents have a way of clarifying priorities. Amanda says I've been selfish and ungrateful. That after everything you did for us, offering you a garage was shameful. Patricia stared at her hands. She's probably right. The admission surprised me. Why did you offer the garage, Patricia? You must have known how it would feel to me. Honestly, because it was the minimum I could offer without disrupting our lives. Thomas and I had just started enjoying our empty nest. Having you in the house would have changed everything. At least you're honest now. I didn't think you'd actually leave, she admitted. I thought you'd realize how difficult it would be on your own and accept whatever we offered. Instead, I found Riverside. Instead, you found Riverside, she echoed, looking around the cottage. And apparently thrived here. We talked for another hour, our most honest conversation in years. Patricia acknowledged her failure to recognize my need for dignity and purpose beyond grandmother duties. I admitted my disappointment in her priorities, but also my understanding of her desire for independence after years of family obligations. I can't promise dramatic changes overnight, Patricia said as our conversation concluded. But I'd like to do better going forward. Maybe regular visits? Amanda wants to come monthly. I'd like that, I replied sincerely. And Patricia? I don't need grand gestures. Just basic respect for the life I'm building here. The visit established a tentative new pattern. Amanda began regular weekend visits, sometimes with Patricia, occasionally alone once she gained confidence in highway driving. These visits gradually expanded to include Jennifer, who discovered Riverside's artisan shops aligned with her aesthetic interests. Robert remained professionally distant but began forwarding relevant medical journal articles without accompanying criticism. My 72nd Christmas brought another significant development. After declining Patricia's invitation to their home, "Too much commotion for your heart condition," she explained awkwardly, I received an unexpected group text from my 3 children. "We'd like to visit you in Riverside for Christmas Day, if that works for your health and schedule." Their visit proved surprisingly pleasant. My children seemed genuinely impressed by the Christmas decorations throughout Riverside, particularly the community center's holiday market, where my watercolor Christmas cards were displayed for sale. They participated politely in my modest gift exchange and expressed appropriate appreciation for the thoughtful presents from Helen and Walter. Most meaningful was their collective acknowledgement of my successful reinvention. "You seem happy here, Mom," Jennifer observed. "More energetic than when you lived closer." "I am happy," I confirmed. "I have purpose, friends, even creative outlets I never explored before." "We should have handled things differently," Robert admitted, the closest he would come to an apology. "But it seems to have worked out for the best." As winter yielded to spring, I celebrated 1 year in Riverside Meadows by hosting a garden party. My carefully tended perennials provided a colorful backdrop for gathering friends and family together. Amanda helped serve refreshments. Patricia brought her famous deviled eggs. Jennifer arrived with her new boyfriend, who photographed the event. Even Robert attended briefly, though he claimed a hospital emergency required his early departure. Most significantly, my Riverside friends and family interacted with authentic warmth rather than forced politeness. Helen shared gardening tips with Patricia. Walter discussed fishing with Jennifer's boyfriend. Victor engaged Robert in debate about healthcare policy. Amanda volunteered to help Gladys with her community history project. As twilight descended on the gathering, I found myself momentarily alone on the sun porch, observing these interconnected lives with profound gratitude. The inheritance that had triggered my children's rejection had ultimately led to an unexpected blessing: freedom to discover my value beyond maternal sacrifice. Douglas would have appreciated the irony. Our lifetime of careful financial planning, intended to provide security for our children, had instead secured my independence from their limitations. The money they had eagerly accepted had briefly diminished me in their eyes, but my response to that diminishment had revealed strength I hadn't known I possessed. The path from betrayal to redemption hadn't followed my expected route. I hadn't returned triumphantly to my children's lives as an honored matriarch. They hadn't experienced dramatic transformations into perfectly supportive offspring. Instead, we had established more authentic, limited relationships based on mutual respect, rather than financial dependency or obligation. My true inheritance, I realized, wasn't the money Douglas and I had accumulated, but the resilience we had developed through decades of partnership. That resilience had allowed me to rebuild when my children offered only leftovers of their attention and care. It had guided me to Riverside, where I had discovered community based on reciprocal contribution, rather than familial duty. As my guests began departing with warm embraces and promises of future gatherings, I felt profound contentment. The mother who had once been offered a garage had created a home where everyone, including her children, sought invitations. The woman who had been told, "We don't have space for you in our lives," had built a life spacious enough to include everyone on appropriate terms. The inheritance had been divided, but the legacy continued in unexpected ways. My children had received financial resources that eased their material burdens. I had received the opportunity to redefine myself beyond motherhood. Both gifts held value, though not the value we had initially recognized. Have you ever experienced a painful rejection that ultimately led to unexpected growth? How did you find the strength to rebuild when relationships disappointed you? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this journey of rediscovery resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more stories about finding dignity and purpose in life's challenging transitions. Share this video with someone who might need encouragement to choose themselves after years of choosing others. Thank you for accompanying me through this chapter of my story. And remember that sometimes the greatest gift we can give ourselves is the courage to begin again.